Hi, this is Dan Goldman, CPO at Rhodes. Today I'm taking you through a full Rhodes restoration using Rhodes official spares. Now sit back, relax and enjoy.
Okay, so the first job that I'm going to start with is to replace these hammer tips. These tips aren't particularly old, but they don't sound right for the piano. There's varying hardnesses in the different zones, like this particular area here. The material is way too hard for that zone, so when you're playing, it might sound soft here, and then suddenly the attack of the tines will just jump out loads more here. Again, this zone here sounds a little too bright as well. The new Rhodes official tips have been designed to kind of minimize those transition points that you naturally tend to get with hammer tips and different zones of tine. So the purpose of this is basically to even out the tone throughout the piano in terms of the amount of bark and the amount of brightness that you hear. You don't want any big jumps in tone. You want it to sound as even and as consistent as possible from the lowest note right to the top. You don't want to suddenly get to a part where you go, oh, that sounds too bright, because then it's much harder to EQ. So the purpose of this is to start the process of evening out the whole tone of the piano with the Rhodes official tips. And then the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to power down and remove this front panel connector here so we can access the hammers. So I'm just going to put these gloves on for safety, because we're going to use a knife to scrape away any of the remaining glue after taking the hammer tips off. I also made this special piece of wood which kind of sits under the hammers. I'll just start at the bottom here. This will support like 2 hammers. So put that underneath like that, and then you can just scrape away any glue. And you have to take care not to, there's these little this little lip, this little ridge at the front of the hammers. You've got to take care to try not to cut that off whilst you're scraping the glue off as well. Otherwise the hammer tip that you put on won't have enough support at the front. So now some people use like a Dremel to do this, but I wouldn't advise it because you can end up taking too much off the surface of the hammer. It's better just to go careful with a knife. Now these ones have come off quite easily, but some of if it's the original tips that were put on the piano, they use some quite stubborn glue, so sometimes it takes quite a lot of scraping to get rid of it, so you have to just go careful and make sure you don't damage anything. It's kind of critical to get the glue out of this little, just before the inside of the kind of ridge, get rid of that, otherwise the hammer tips, when you glue them on, the new ones might sit unevenly on the top of the hammer, which you don't want. So everything's prepped and clean now. We've removed the old hammer tips, and now we're ready to start putting on our hammer tip kit, which we have here. There's 5 different ranges, so it goes clear, red, black, a couple of these extra hard ones, and the hardest at the top. Okay, so we've got this E6000 plus glue, which we ship with our spares kits, which are here in this lovely little pack. So what we're going to do now, we're going to get baby wipes and start applying the glue, and we're going to lay all the tips out here so we can see what we've got in order. So we start with the clear, then we've got the softer reds, so 18 clear, 14 red, 19 black. Got 4 of the extra hard red tips there for the transition zone, and then 20 of the blue tips for the treble area of the piano, which are the extra hard ones for getting the best tone out of the shorter tines in the treble area. Okay, so what you want to do is get your clear tips. It's the first ones. And these will all be bagged separately in the right quantities, labelled, and just tip them out. Okay, and the orientation of the tip is important. It wants to be the highest side at the keyboard side of the hammer top surface. So if we look at the orientation of the hammer, that would look like that. So sloping down away from the keyboard, the highest point towards the keyboard. And it's got to be the thinnest highest point as well, not the wider point. There's two, there's a wider one and there's a thinner one, so make sure it's the thinner one. And what we do is open up our glue, which I prepared earlier, and put a really good amount of glue. Don't be shy with it. Put a good amount of glue onto the top surface of the hammer. You can always wipe off any excess. Always put the cap back on in between use, and then just get your tip, and in the orientation that I described before, place the tip onto the top surface of the hammer, making sure it's completely butted up to this ridge at the player side. You don't want any gaps. You want to make sure it's completely flat and aligned. Each side of the tip should align nicely with each side of the hammer, so it's flush and straight and not twisted, because if it's twisted it will actually affect the strike of the hammer on the tines. Don't worry about any glue spilling out, because you can just wipe it off. And get your baby wipe. You don't want wipes that have got anything that can affect plastic, so try and get the water-based wipes that are sensitive wipes, really, that don't destroy plastic, because you don't want to melt your hammers. So then just wipe around all four surfaces, so make sure you do the back as well and the sides. Sometimes when you're wiping the glue off you can end up pushing the tip out of the correct orientation, so just make sure you can feel down the side there that it's flush, and then just check it over, make sure the glue's off, and then you leave it to dry. Okay, and then we'll continue to repeat that process. I'm just going to go back over and just make sure everything looks good. Make sure they're all straight. Okay, so now that we have replaced all the hammer tips, the next thing we're going to do is flip back to the harp again, and we're going to start the screw grommets and tone bar spring replacements. This will help align the tone bars nicely and give them a nice amount of sort of snap. They want to be nicely snappy and not move too much left and right, and it will really improve the tone of the piano with the new Rhodes official grommets that we've got here. And we spent a lot of time getting the fitment of the screws to the grommets and to the washers really tight, so you get a really perfect fit, and everything will align really nicely, and for voicing and everything it all just works really consistently and nicely together, so you get a nice overall result at the end where everything's very consistent. So yeah, we're going to start off with the bass tone bars and work our way up. So let's get the parts first. We've got our black tone bar springs for the bass area of the piano. We've got our new tone bar screws. We've got our beautiful new grommets here, and the cup washers that go with the screws and the grommets. So with the help of my trusty drill, I am now going to take out the first tone bar. Now, some of the screws are harder to get out than others on these old pianos because they're often rounded out, so you have to apply a lot of pressure. You can see how bent that screw is as it's coming out as well, which won't be helping anything. So you can see the old grommet is stuck to the screw and it's all kind of shredded as well, which isn't good, which means that it's not going to slide up and down the screw nicely, and that the free movement of the tone bar isn't going to be optimal at all. Hence why we're going to replace all these. You can see how that's kind of going in a figure of 8 pattern because the screw's bent, which is going to impede good general setup of the piano. You often see these double sprung screws as well, which is an attempt to try and stabilize any tines that were kind of moving in a figure of 8 pattern. So we'll get rid of those as well. Put them over here. So there you've got your tine and tone bar assembly. Pretty crazy. That's the heart of the Rhodes, this asymmetrical tuning fork. Ingenious design of Harold's. Okay, so next thing we do is we get the grommets, take 2 of them, and we place the grommets into the tone bar, which we've designed for a perfect fit with old tone bars as well as using them in the Mark 8. So you're essentially getting some of the essence of the tone of the Mark 8 by using all these parts as well, which is a really nice thing for the new piano to be feeding back into the old pianos. Next, take a couple of cup washers, just take some of these out here. Make sure there's just one. And then you place them over the grommets, which have a countersink in them, and these are countersunk as well, which gives a really nice fit of the tone bar to the grommet and to the washers and the screws. Let's place that down for a second. Then we take a couple of tone bar screws. So it's grommet, then washers on the top, then screws through, push them in, and then these seat nicely over the grommets, like so. So there you've got your new assembly there with new screws, new washers, new grommets, and new black springs. And then we place it back into the piano. You can see how it's moving down nice and straight right onto the tine like that, and it's compare that to this. Now it's nice and tight and it springs back to center, which is really nice. And there's the first one. Right, so as you can see, I've replaced all the tone bar springs, all the screws, grommets and washers throughout the piano now, which will improve so many different aspects of the piano. It'll improve the alignment of the tines to the pickups. You can see now that the tone bars are very tight and they've got good spring back. But the alignment and the gaps between each tone bar is very consistent now compared to before, where they were just flying about everywhere. I haven't actually done any setup work on this yet, so I haven't set the voicing or the heights or anything, but already you can see that it's all looking a lot more uniform and coming together nicely, and the tines are aligned better with the pickups. Yeah, these new screws and grommets and springs and washers that we've developed make a huge difference to any Rhodes. These new Rhodes official parts will just transform any old piano. Again, they all come from the Mark 8. They're all being developed for the Mark 8, so it's really nice to be able to bring all those benefits that you get in the Mark 8, bringing those parts into the old pianos and giving them a new lease of life. So what you might also notice is just around here, when we're trying to take out some of the old screws because they were so rusted and really soft, a couple of the screws had snapped inside the wood of the time rail, so we had to dig those out and plug the hole and then fill around a hole to form a new surface and sand it down. So we've done that here on note 40. And then there was another one up here that we did as well, I think note 60. So that's something to watch out for, especially when pianos have been water damaged. You often find that the threads are rusted. You can see these tines are rusted pretty badly, and the tone bars as well, but it doesn't normally affect the sound, especially if it's on the block. If it's on the tine, it can reduce the life of the part, but generally the tines are pretty resilient. Moving on, at the top of the piano, you probably noticed that at note 61 here, there's some different screws. Well, this is a discovery we made when we were developing the Mark 8, that in an ideal situation, and this was something that was on the Mark 5, the tone bar screw nearest the keyboard was suspended on rubber standoffs. And that was essentially because to get optimal sustain out of the shorter tines, the rear of the tone bar needs to be floating even more freely. So you have lighter weight springs on that back screw anyway, but we've also developed a new hardness of grommet and a thinner screw to use with the last few notes of the piano, which really increases the sustain and therefore improves the tone of the piano overall as well. So that's a really nice thing that's unique to our Rhodes Official spares kit. All of those things together really add up to a massive benefit in terms of the way the piano plays and the overall tone and sustain the top end of the piano, which is always quite problematic on every Rhodes piano. But couple that with our new Rhodes Official tines as well, and the sustain in the top end of the piano is significantly increased, and the tone improved too, combined with the hammer tips and all the other benefits of all the Rhodes Official parts. So I've got the final 3 notes to sort here at the top of the piano. We're going to replace the screws, the grommets, the washers, and the suspension springs as well. So we're just going to go ahead and finish those, and then the piano will be complete, apart from putting this other tone bar in here, which I just need to drill a new hole for here. So I'm just going to get on with these now. Bear in mind when you're doing these, restoration work, every Rhodes is different and they'll all throw up different issues. So you've just got to stay calm and get on with the job, basically. Remove the old springs, the old screws, and you can see bits of beeswax left as well from where the factory used to put beeswax into the holes. Okay, so the next part of the restoration is to start the process of installing new dampers, all new damper combs and damper felts. These are the new combs here. So much more resilient, tougher material than in any old pianos. Again, that we specially designed and is unique to the Rhodes Official spares line. So in order to replace the dampers, we've got to access where the dampers fix to the piano, which is under the back of the harp here and under this damper rail. So we're going to flip the harp into its forward position here. Should be all right there. And then let's come around the back of the piano. If you're worried about the harp dropping, just put one hand on it just to steady it. And then we're just going to take out the 2 screws, one either side of the damper rail, which secure the pins that run through the damper rail each side into the damper rail. And always put these safely aside because they're pretty unique screws, these, so don't lose them. Right. Now, the next thing is you need to push the pins, one of the pins anyway, with an Allen key. Which is a little tricky thing because you can't actually see it. Aha! And now we can remove the rail from the back of the piano. So just lift it up on one side and then just pull it out like that, taking care not to lose the pins either side here. Put that safely aside. Now you can get access to all the damper combs at the back of the piano. I think at this point as well, it's probably worth actually removing the harp just to avoid any injuries or any other issues, and just to allow full access to the back. So I'm just going to go ahead and remove these screws here and bolts from each side. Just going to retrieve this washer. It's a technical term for it. And you always tend to find other parts as well whilst you're in there. There's actually another washer down here as well, so I'll get that out at the same time. Put the keys back in. That's pretty cool. Date stamp there of 39th week of 1978. That's pretty cool. Okay, so before we can actually remove the damper combs, which these are called damper combs, the next step is to release all the bridle straps from each finger of each damper comb. The straps are hooked onto these little hooks that pull down from each finger. Sometimes they are glued on, as in this piano, so we'll have to use some acetone and try and get them off here, like, carefully. We'll also need to cover all the hammers up to make sure none of that gets onto the hammers, because the acetone will actually dissolve the plastic if you're not careful. So we're just going to start that procedure now. Okay, so now we're going to remove the screws that hold each damper comb in. There's 2 screws per comb. I'm just going to start from the base end. You want to keep these screws as well, which will work with our new Rhodes official damper combs. So again, put them safely to one side once you've removed them. And you can see how each area of the piano has a different length of comb. So you've got 2 bass, 2 mid, 2 treble, and then a single one at the top. So there's the first one out. Second one out. Third one. Fourth one. Fifth one out. Last comb now. Top treble one. And then the final single damper for note number 73. And there we go. So now you can see some more of the inner workings of the piano. You've got your action rail here, and this is what obviously the damper combs are mounted to, but also the hammer combs that the hammers click into. These are all injection molded parts, and I think we're in good shape here to carry on with the restoration. Okay, so we've got our new Rhodes official damper combs here. These are the product of a lot of research and development. They look similar to the old combs, but they are completely different. The material's different, the form of them, the shape, and they're designed to give the optimum damping power in any Rhodes or Fender Rhodes piano. So yeah, they've got these wings in it, pressed wings at the side, which on the older pianos, they didn't run the whole length, but we've run them the whole length here to give it even more stopping power and snap for the damping of the piano, which just completely revolutionizes the whole intonation of the piano. So we've got them laid out. We've got 2 bass, which have the shortest kind of tension area, 2 mids, 2 trebles, and one single at the top. The mids and the trebles have the same tension area there, which works really well. The bass ones has this shorter one because the longer tines need a lot more stopping power from the dampers in order to stop dead. And there aren't any dampers in existence apart from these, which have enough power to really stop aggressively hit tines in pianos with like wider hammer throws, like the Mark 8 and the Mark 5 especially. So we've designed these to give optimum damping for any old Rhodes piano, and these also feature in the Mark 8 and why it sounds as great as it does. Okay, so now we've got them all laid out here. The next step is to push through the little hooks that hook onto the bridle straps in the hammer to connect the whole engine of the piano together, so to speak. So in order to push these little hooks through, which you can see here, I've already done some in advance. We've got this little tool that we made in-house here, but you can make one yourself pretty easily. It's just a piece of wood with a little, I think it's actually the end of a tine in there that we've pushed in, which is perfect. So you just take the comb, this applies to any of the combs here, put some kind of weight on the back of the comb, put your finger under where the hook is, and then just push down gently for about 3 or 4 mil. You don't want to push too far because you can snap these off. So you just go really careful. Just a little push. It's just important to give them a little support as you push them down to not put too much stress on them. It's better to proceed with caution than go too far with them, and you can always bend them down a little further once they're in the piano, but this is just to get them started, really. So there we go, that's one comb done there. You can see all the hooks pushed down, and then they're ready to put the straps on. And then I'm going to proceed and go through the whole rest of the piano now. And then we'll put the combs into the piano, hook the straps on, and then glue the felts on the remaining fingers that haven't had felts put on them so far. Okay, now we're going to install the combs into the piano. So we'll start at the bass end. And in this aluminium extrusion here, which is called the action rail, that these mount to, there's a tiny little gap that runs the full length of it, it's the perfect kind of width for these to slot into. So there's a little slot here along the back, a little channel. So you can just slide the comb in, and when you first put it into the piano, what you want to do is have these want to line up nicely with the hammers. So if you pull up a hammer and just look at the alignment of the end one, the end finger of each comb, you'll know you're in a good spot there. So that looks pretty good to me. And then you can then go around the back of the piano and screw it in. And before you completely lock it down, just check the alignment again. We've actually made a big improvement to the old Rhodes combs here by just putting a slot in, which allows side to side nuancing of the position as well if you need. Carry on. It's easier at first to align them from the keyboard side. You'll notice that this comb hasn't got any felts on yet, and this one has. It's up to you really when you want to do that in your process when you're working on your piano, but it doesn't really matter which way around you do it. If you do it out of the piano, there's less chance of glue going anywhere. So that's probably the better way to do it, but just for the demonstration purposes now, I'm going to get them all in the piano together and glue them on inside the piano carefully. So. And just with this one, just check to make sure the gap is even between the last finger of the last treble comb and this single one. And that completes the installation of all the damper combs. So the final thing we're going to do before we glue on the final felts that are missing is we are going to hook on the bridle straps that we have just pulled down the hooks for. Now this is a little bit tricky, so take your time with it, but really what you want to do is sort of cradle the bridle strap with one of your fingers, probably your index finger, and then with your other hand push down the finger to meet the bridle strap, and then you just have to feel as it hooks on, find the hole in the end of the strap and then just push it on. It takes a little bit of practice, but once you've got the knack for it, you'll motor through it. Okay, so now we've got all the damper arms installed, and the majority of the Rhodes Official damper felts are now installed on the ends of our Rhodes Official damper combs. So I'm just going to demonstrate how you glue on the felts, and you can also get a good look at the orientation of the felts here as well. What we call the base felts run for the majority of the piano, and they want to go in that sort of longest orientation, lying down, not up like that, not tall and thin, but the longest part, and they always want to be flush with, not wider than the arms that they're on. So if you lie it down on the wrong side, you'll see it's wider than the arm. You want to make sure it's in its longest orientation when it's lying down and flush with either side of the damper comb fingers. So what you want to do is get the glue onto, a good amount of glue onto each finger, on the end of each finger, that roughly is the same size as the underside of the felt. Try not to put too much glue on there because it'll sort of come out around the sides of the felt and it can soak up the sides and then harden the felt, and then you won't get as good damping power. So just go carefully, but and that's pretty good there. So that completes all the felt installation of the Rhodes Official damper felts on the Rhodes Official damper combs.